3-4-5 triangle. In a 3-4-5 triangle, one of the angles is 53.13 degrees. Anytime you have a right triangle where one of the angles is 53.13 degrees, then the ratios we're about to talk about are the same, no matter how big the triangle is. So if I made the triangle 10 times bigger, then we just multiply all of the sides by 10. So whether this triangle is small or big, this angle is 53.13, and if we call that angle theta, so that's the angle we're looking at, the sine of theta is going to be opposite divided by hypotenuse. In the little triangle, it would be 4/5. On the big triangle, it would be 40/50. In all cases, that equals 0.8. If the triangle was half as big, then it would be 1.5, 2, and 2.5. And the sine of theta would be 2/2.5, which happens to be 0.8. Which means, if you know the angle, you don't even need the triangle to know what the ratio is. They all have the same ratio. And those buttons are on our calculator. We can find the ratios just using our calculator by typing in the sine of 53.13. So in your calculator, the sine of 53.13 is 0.799999. Now, why isn't that perfect? Why isn't it exactly 0.8? And the reason is 53.13 isn't, it's been rounded. It's actually 53.130625 something, something, something. So anytime you round a number and plug it into your calculator, the answer will be off by a little bit. That will come into play later today. How does that help us? Well, if I know what the ratio is, and I know sort of how big the triangle is, I can use that information to find the rest of the triangle. If we have our similar triangle, 53.13, if I knew that the hypotenuse was 86 feet, how big is the opposite side? Well, we use trig. This would be theta. I know that the sine of 53.13 is equal to, and don't forget SOHCAHTOA, So the sine of 53.13 is opposite, which is x, divided by hypotenuse, which is 86. So x divided by 86. I know what the ratio is. This is 0.8. 0.8 is equal to whatever x value is there divided by 86. How do you solve for x? How do we get this x by itself? Multiply it by 86. So 86 times 0.8, or 86 times the sine of 53, is going to give you the value of x. On your calculator, we type in 86 times the sine of 53.13, and I get 68.799. That number divided by 86 should be 0.8. I divide that number by 86, I should get 0.8. I'm not sure if you understand what we've done. Hopefully this will help. We've taken a specific shape of a right triangle. So there are an infinite number of right triangles. We pick the one where one of the angles is 53.13. And then we know that the hypotenuse is 86. So we take that triangle and we stretch it out until the hypotenuse is 86. Once I know which triangle to pick, it's really easy to find the length of that opposite side. All you need is one angle. Well, it has to be a right triangle. So one angle inside a right triangle, and any one of the sides, and using sine, cosine, and tangent, you can find all of the other side lengths. That is the main power of trig. Now, it gets much more complicated, but this is sort of the simple version. So let's say that this is a 30-degree angle, and I know that the opposite side is 18. Can we find the length of the hypotenuse and the length of the adjacent? Well, we need SOHCAHTOA again. And when you pick your trig ratio, you have to pick one that uses a side that we do know. So in this case, you can't pick cosine. Cosine would be adjacent over hypotenuse, and I don't know either the hypotenuse or the adjacent, so cosine doesn't do us any good at this point. So instead, I need to decide, do I want to find h first or do I want to find a first? Let's find h. Let's find this. Which trig ratio is going to use 18 and h? Sine. Sine is O over h. So according to 30 degrees, this would be opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. Sine of 30, so the sine of the angle, is equal to 18 over h. Now, there are really only two types of solution methods. In this case, I have a trig function equals something over h, and on the last page, I have a trig function equals something, an unknown something, over the 86 that I did know. Your variable will either be on top or it will be on bottom. If the variable is on top, like it was here, you just multiply by the denominator, and then you're done. On the next page, it's a little bit harder. Well, not really, but it appears to be harder. Here, I need to multiply by h. I multiply by h, and I have h sine of 30 is equal to 18, but I need to separate the sine from the h. What's holding h and the sine together? What operation is between there? We're multiplying. How do you undo multiplication? You divide. So we're going to divide by the sine of 30. That's the hard way to do it. The easy way to do it is this. The sine of 30 equals 18 over h. If the variable's on the bottom, just switch those two. So you either have a multiply problem or you have a switch problem. In this case, it's a switch problem. We end up with h is equal to 18 over the sine of 30. So your calculator, 18 divided by the sine of 30. And I get 36. So h is 36. What if I wanted to find a? What trig ratio would I use to find a if I also use the hypotenuse? Sine, cosine, or tangent? Sine would be O. We just use sine. Sine would be O over h. It would be cosine. Cosine would be A over h. We write it out. Cosine of 30 is equal to A over 36. Is that a multiply or a switch problem? Do I multiply by 36 to get A by itself, or do I switch the cosine and the A to get A by itself? So there are only two types. If the variable's on the bottom, then you switch. If the variable's on the top, then you multiply. the answer for A is 36 cosine of 30. So 36 cosine of 30, and I have 31 point, or sorry, it's 30, oh, that's right, 31.17. All right, let's do one more, and then you can do your assignment. Let's say that this is 65 degrees. We'll call that theta, and that is 5. How would I calculate x? What trig ratio would I need to pick in order to find x? Sine, cosine, or tangent? Cosine uses adjacent and hypotenuse. Cosine won't work. Adjacent I don't have. Hypotenuse I don't have. What about sine? Would sine help me find x? Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So the sine would help me find the hypotenuse. But if I'm looking for x, I have to pick cosine. Or sorry, tangent. I have to pick tangent. I write down the tangent of the angle, 65, is equal to, well, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So tangent would be 5 over x. Is that a multiply or a switch problem? Do I multiply by the denominator, or do I switch the trig function in the denominator? This one's a switch. If the variable's on the bottom, you just switch, which yields x equals 5 over the tangent of 65. In your calculator, you just type in 5 over the tangent of 65, and I get 2.33. Now if I want to find the other side, if I want to find h, I have two options. Pay attention, man. I have two options. I could either use the sine or the cosine. One is a little bit easier than the other. If I use the sine of 65 would equal what? What fraction would be equal to the sine of 65? Well, what is the opposite side of 65 degrees? Which of those three lengths is opposite 65? Opposite means, that's not a point. Okay. Opposite means the one that does not touch that angle. So the one that does not touch 65 would be 5 over, the hypotenuse would be h. What if I went the other direction? What if I use the cosine? The cosine of 65 would equal, what is the length of the adjacent? Adjacent means next to, but both of these are next to, except the hypotenuse is always h, and the leg that is next to the angle would be 2.33. Both of these are switch problems. We switch those, and we switch that, and I end up with h is equal to 5 over the sine of 65, or h is equal to 2.33 over the sine of 65. Those are not going to give me exactly the same answer. Let me show you why. So 5 divided by the sine of 65 gives me that, and 2.33 divided by the cosine of 65 gives me something really close. Why are they not exactly the same answer? The reason is 2.33 has been rounded. In order for that second one to be totally correct, I have to type in this entire decimal up here, the 2.331538, all of that stuff. So 2.331538291 divided by the cosine of 65. That should be exactly the same as the sine problem. And now you can see that those two are the same. So if you have your choice, do I use sine or do I use cosine, and they both will work, I would pick the one that has easier numbers. It'll be more accurate. You won't have to type in as many decimals. So when you have the option, pick the one that's easier and that's more accurate. So your assignment today, if we look at, let's look at number 2. You've been given one angle, one side, and it asks you to find one of the other sides. Which trig ratio do we need to pick to solve number 2? This angle is theta, which is 73. Sine, cosine, or tangent? Cosine. X would be the adjacent, and 6 would be the hypotenuse, which yields the cosine of 73 is equal to x over 6. Is that a switch or a multiply problem? Multiply. So I times both sides by 6. 6 cosine of 73 will be the answer. All right? Any questions? You do need to show this work. If you don't show that work, we won't give you credit. Other than that, you're good to go.